followed by the Medo-Persian Empire, is the Greek and the Roman, and then the divided kingdom, and then finally the rock cut out without hands, which represents the coming of Christ and setting up of his kingdom, which will last forever. We are living down in the times of the divided kingdom, aren't we? We're living in the toes of time, as some people have said, put it, in the times of the divided Europe. And we're not living at the end of time, but we are living in the time of the end. There is a distinction in between the two phrases. End of time is when Jesus comes again. But can we read in current world events, signs of the second coming of Jesus? If you still got your Bible open at Matthew 24, let's have a look at verse 3, Matthew 24, verse 3. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when will these things be?" And he's talking about the destruction of the temple. "And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" In verse 5 of Matthew 24, Jesus says that many will come in my name saying, "I am the Christ." The word Christ in the Greek, in the New Testament, is the Greek equivalent for Messiah in the Old Testament, the Christos, the Messiah. So many are going to come in my name and say, "I am the Christ." On Christmas Day in 2017, a lady by the name of Candace Sutton wrote an article for news.com, and she found a story about 7 men around the world who claim to be the reincarnated Jesus Christ. We've got people in our world today who think they are Jesus or claiming to be Christ. And she says there are at least 7 of them around the world, and many of them have a following of devoted believers, from a retired Siberian traffic cop named Vissarion to a cross-dressing former British spy, David Shayler. These men all claim to be the Son of God. Here's one of them. His name, he calls himself Jesus of Kitwe in Zambia. And he goes out to the marketplaces and said, you know, believe in me and you'll be saved. He's a taxi driver who was originally beaten by townsfolk for claiming to be Jesus. But now he says that I'm even more senior than Jesus in the heavenly kingdom. Near Brazil, Brazil capital, a former waiter by the name of Inri Cristo gets around in a white robe topped off with a plaited white crown. And his devoted female disciples, who live with him in a small compound behind an electrified fence, by the way, push him around on a fringed red satin platform on wheels. Many claimants have come forward. There are others. There's like Moses of Crete, if you go back long into the past, in the 5th century. And this lady, we don't exactly know what she looked like because they didn't have cameras in those days. 1772, this lady by the name of Anna Lee, she belonged to the American Order called Shakers, and she considered herself Christ's female counterpart. And then there's the racing driver, Claude Vorillon, who founded the UFO religion, the Rael movement in 1972. According to the New World Encyclopedia, another famous messianic claimant was Simon Bar Kokhba, who gained the support of the famous Talmudic rabbi Akiva and succeeded in establishing a state independent of Roman rule from approximately 132 to 135 Christian era. His rebellion was eventually crushed at a cost estimated to be as high as 500,000 Jewish lives. Well, coming back to Matthew 24, let's have a look at verse 6 and 7, the first part of verse 7. And you'll hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, there were 36 wars in the 19th century, 37 in the 20th century. And of course, we think about our own century, the 21st century. What do we think of? We think of Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Ethiopia, Sudan, and currently, of course, we can't forget Ukraine, the war that's going on there. Ellen White, in the Review and Herald of 1909, January the 28th, said, "We are standing on the threshold of great and solemn events. Prophecies are fulfilling. Strange and eventful history is being recorded in the books of heaven. Events which it was declared should shortly precede the day of God. Everything in the world is in an unsettled state." Now, if that was true a century ago when she wrote that, what could we say of today? Everything is in an unsettled state. The nations are angry and great preparations for war are being made. And of course, 1909 she was writing, and it was only, 5 years later that the World War I began. The great day of God is hasting greatly, but although the nations are mustering their forces for war and bloodshed, the command to the angels is still in force, that they hold the four winds until the servants of God are sealed in their foreheads. And earlier in 1901, Ellen White wrote, "Notwithstanding that the signs of the times are fulfilling all over the world, faith in the Lord's coming has been growing feeble." So perhaps we could say that sadly, rather than Jesus being God's only begotten son, he has almost become God's only forgotten son by the world around us today. What about natural disasters? So let's have a look at the second half of verse 7 in Matthew 24. "And there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places." Verse 8, "All these are the beginning of sorrows." And then in verse 9 through to 14, some more signs that of Jesus coming. "Then they will deliver you up to tribulation," verse 9 here, "and kill you, and you'll be hated by all nations for my name's sake." So it's talking here about persecution. And there are some countries in our world today where you're in danger of your life if you try to spread the Christian message. You're not allowed to convert people to Christianity in some countries. Verse 10, "And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another." Verse 11, "Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved." And then verse 14 gives us the ultimate sign. "And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come." One of the other signs that we could expect in the last days is found in Revelation chapter 3 and verses 15 to 17. Here it's talking about the lukewarm church, Revelation 3, verses 15 to 17. And first of all, God gives a message of rebuke to this church. "I know your works," verse 15, "that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked." Fortunately, the message doesn't stop there, because then we go on to verse 18. "I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, truly rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you may see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. And then there's this beautiful picture of Christ who's knocking at the door of our hearts. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me. And then the final promise in verse 21, to him who overcomes, I will grant to sit with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. And so there is hope, there is the remedy, and the invitation here in these verses. Let's get back to Matthew 24 and look at some more signs of Christ coming. Matthew 24, and we're going to look again at a verse we noticed earlier, and that was verse 27. Matthew 24, verses 26 and 27 we'll actually read. And here Jesus is giving a warning about false Christs. He says, therefore they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out. Or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. And then not only is it going to be highly visible, but it seems as though there's going to be a bit audible as well, because in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verses 51 and 52, we read these words concerning the return of Christ. Behold, I tell you a mystery, we shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. If you wanted to choose an instrument that's going to be pretty penetrating, you would choose a brass instrument, wouldn't you? You know, I guess you've had the Avondale Brass Band here sometimes, and they don't need amplifying. You don't need to put microphones on them. I remember when I was, before I became a full-time minister, I was working at the high school, and in the music department, there was a cartoon there, and the window was open and the curtain was blowing, and the little boy was saying to his dad, why is it the thieves only took my trumpet? Probably because they're such a loud instrument, and they got on the works of the parents and they decided we're going to take this thing away. And when Jesus said, I'm coming again with the trumpet sound, we're not going to miss it, are we? It's going to be audible. We'll certainly hear it. And as we read before in 1 Thessalonians 4 and verses 15 to 18, there'll be the shout. There'll be the trumpet of God, be the voice of the archangel, which will accompany his return. And so all of this is quite loud as far as his coming is concerned. I like this quote from Jan Paulson, who is a former General Conference president in our church. And he says, our interest in the signs of the second coming must be a healthy interest based on clear biblical information. Our study of biblical prophecy should result in the strengthening of our hope and of our commitment to the Lord who died to save us. If it results in fear, uncertainty, and prejudice against others, there is something wrong with the way we are reading the signs of the coming of Christ. It's good counsel, isn't it? Good caution here.